Hey, what's going on, chat? Welcome to Gothalion Game Director Borderlands 3. This is a game I waited a long time for. 7 years, all of us big Borderlands fans were waiting on Gearbox's opus, the follow-up to Borderlands 2. Borderlands 2 was massive for me, not only on a content creation front, but just for me as a gamer. Borderlands 1 was kind of like a big transition game for me. I just come off of playing World of Warcraft, so I needed like something to fill that gap. And Borderlands really scratched an itch I didn't know I had. Borderlands 2 was a big step over Borderlands 1, improving on pretty much every system within the game. And it was a much smaller time gap. It was, what was it, like 4 years after Borderlands 1's last DLC wrapped up. And then we had a 7-year wait. We had a 7-year wait between Borderlands 2 and 3. And I feel like myself and a lot of the Borderlands community expected a grandiose, huge, socially connected, modern take on Borderlands. And what we got wasn't quite that. In my opinion, and I can't stress this enough, this video is 100% me. This is my opinion. These are the things that I would have liked to have seen. These are the things that I maybe didn't enjoy or did enjoy. 100% an opinion piece. I'm not putting this out there saying that this is what Gearbox needs to do, but if I was in their position, this is what I would have done. And we're going to go over that towards the end of the video. But to start off, what we got with Borderlands 3, I put in 300 hours with this game, 300 plus hours with this game when it first came out. First playthrough was awesome. The initial loot grind once I hit max level felt good, but then I sort of hit a wall. And I looked back at the playtime with Borderlands 3, and I had to make some assessments. I felt like Borderlands 3, on its surface, it was a good shooter, much better than Borderlands 2 as far as the shooting goes. Visually, the world is gorgeous. The art style that Gearbox brought with Borderlands 3 was definitely a step up from that of Borderlands 2. But the core systems felt very Borderlands 2.5. And those are where I really want to focus here. I could talk about gun balance. I could talk about glitches. I could talk about performance, like on consoles. I guess it doesn't run quite as well, but that's to be expected. I could talk about that stuff all day. But the thing about those topics is those are all patchable. And I'm a firm believer in all it takes is one patch to make a game much better. So I'm not going to harp on that stuff. I'm not going to harp on current in-game. I'm going to talk about the core systems, what the game is at its base level. To me, Borderlands 3 was an excellent single-player, one-time through, and then run around at endgame for a little bit kind of game. What I wanted from Borderlands 3 was the next addiction. I wanted something that I was going to pour 1,000 plus hours into. I wanted something that I would look forward to logging into each day with chat and playing some games. I wanted something where I would look forward to new endgame activities to play with my friends. I wanted something that made me feel like I wanted to grind it for a reason other than just grinding it. When making this game, I feel like Gearbox looked at what worked with Borderlands 2 and they said, let's put those things under a microscope. So the humor of Borderlands 2 was definitely ramped up in Borderlands 3, but a lot of that dark tone I felt was lost between the two games, and that might just be a difference of writers. In between Borderlands 2 and 3, the social systems saw barely any upgrade. The changes that we saw were being able to mail your friends stuff and pretty loose matchmaking that I'm not sure anybody really uses. The same old systems of save and quit farming, having to remake your group, going back into the game are still ever present in Borderlands 3. When I first went to the Borderlands reveal in May 2019, the second I got to talk to devs, I asked them questions like, are we going to save and quit farm? Will the saves be on a server? What are you doing to combat things like save editors? Like the whole gambit. I wanted to know the social systems. I wanted to know that Borderlands 3 was a step above 2 in some pretty vital areas for a modern game, and it just isn't. Going back to how Gearbox took Borderlands 2 and basically put everything that worked in it under a magnifying glass, microscope, whatever. We're looking at loot drops. In Borderlands 2, I would farm for hours, and it felt good. Because when I saw that orange drop, I got excited. Is it the thing I want? Is it the roll on the thing I want? Is it a good, powerful roll on the thing I want? Because even though legendaries came in Borderlands 2, they were still rare. They still felt rare. And I feel like Gearbox looked at that feeling of finding legendaries, and they said, okay, let's magnify that. When Borderlands 3 launched, legendary drop rates were insane, and then they got dialed back a little bit, and then people got mad. And now they've been dialed forward. And now you're seeing more legendary drops. You're seeing more anointments, because I believe the design philosophy was to try to accent that good feeling of finding a legendary. And I think therein, there's a mistake. Because when you're finding too much good stuff, all of the good stuff becomes normal stuff. All the normal legendaries aren't quite as good as anointments. So then all the oranges become garbage unless they're big glowy oranges. I believe that it was a mistake ramping up the legendary drop rates. I think out the gate, they really needed to have focused areas to farm. I think good loot should have been rare. And I think focusing in on super high orange drop rates was a massive mistake for Borderlands 3 compared to 2 and 1. I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me. Again, this is an opinion piece, but I think the game can be overly rewarding, which takes away that good feel when you're finding those oranges. It feels like Gearbox really wanted to set out to possibly make a live service-esque, socially connected game, and either they didn't have the budget to do it properly, or didn't want to spend the money to do it properly, or didn't have the time to do it properly, because what we ended up with was something like halfway in between, like a halfway live service, like a halfway social game. And with the events they're doing, it's kind of getting there, but not quite, because the core of how their social systems work, it just isn't good for that sort of live service feel. And I know live service can be a dirty word for people, so let's just call it a social game. In Borderlands 2, you had the drop in, drop out, you had the farm with friends, and then you would have to reset the game, remake the group, and go back in, which I felt like always would mess up the flow of the game, which is exactly what it's like in Borderlands 3. When you join up with a friend and you're farming, you kill the thing that you want to kill, and there's no way to reset the instance. There's no persistent world to respawn that thing, really, to farm efficiently with friends, than to stop the game, reset the game, re-invite your friend, and go back into it. And it's even worse for matchmaking. If you matchmake into a farming session and the host is restarting, then you're going to be bopped out of their game, and you have to go through the whole process again. This is not a good system for a 2020, I guess it came out 2019, social game. With the way that they're doing events now, the way that they're promoting it socially, it really feels like they want it to be a social game, but they just don't have the tools to do it. Having your saves exist client-side, having peer-to-peer connections, having the game set up in such a way where you have to remake your group every time you kill a boss, just is not good for multiplayer. It's not good when it feels like the entire point of current game is to hunt oranges with big spirals on them, to find those anointments. It's not really that smooth to do with friends, and I think that is a big detractor. These loot games are so much better when you have buds. They're so much better in social settings when you can go into a hub and look at a guy and he's got a crazy weapon and you're like, that guy's got a crazy weapon. That feeling doesn't exist in Borderlands, and that's because I think it is so heavily based on the social systems and the online interactivity of Borderlands 2. I really wish they would have stepped beyond what was created in 2012 instead of just modifying it a bit. Look, I love Borderlands. Nothing I've said here isn't out of hate. It's out of love. It's out of disappointment for where I feel the series is right now, which is where I don't think it could be or should be. Borderlands is such an amazing franchise. I put so many hours into 1 and 2, and I felt like 3 just didn't get to that tier. Had I been in charge, which, saying that, I have absolutely no experience. I don't know how much it would have costed. I'm basically an idiot. I'm a creative guy telling you what I would have done. So nothing I'm saying now actually holds any weight. But if it did, For Borderlands 3, I would have loved to have seen a much more socially connected experience. I'm talking Sanctuary 3 as a social hub where there's other Vault Hunters running around. You can see the gear they have. There's daily, monthly, weekly quest givers, and a better cadence for online gaming. I would have liked to have seen all the sessions done in a private or sort of like how Destiny does it, where it's like peer-to-peer, but it's also in the cloud, so it like hosts can bump around a lot more. To me, online Destiny always feels good in PvE. In Borderlands, because of its strict PvE, like peer-to-peer for PvE nature, it doesn't always feel as crisp. And I would have liked to have seen a more connected world, one where we can make parties or reset areas or go out on missions without resetting the party, without having to stop that action. I would have loved to have seen a much more connected, lively, social experience for Borderlands. Something like we're going to see in Diablo 4, which you're always going to see players running around the world. I would have loved to have left Sanctuary 3, landed on Pandora, and seen other Vault Hunters running around and doing their thing, making the world feel alive in a game that I think would very much benefit from deeper social systems. I can't stress this enough. This is like, I know it's like the one thing I'm picking on the most, but I feel like social systems, multiplayer, the way we interact with other Vault Hunters, and the way that's set up is the biggest failure of this game because it was so not improved from 2012, and I feel like it needed to be. And I think this is probably the most expensive thing that I wanted to see in a quasi MMO action RPG for Borderlands, but I think it's what they should have done, and I hope for Borderlands 4 it's what they're aiming to do. This is an expectation that I've had for Borderlands since the end of the pre-sequel. At the end of the pre-sequel, the Construct, Guardian, whatever, drops down in Sanctuary, stops Lilith from killing Athena, and says, we can't fight amongst ourselves or whatever. You're going to need all the Vault Hunters you can get. There's war coming, basically.
Fire! What the hell?
Now is not the time for bickering, Vault Hunters. War is coming, and you will need all the Vault Hunters you can get.
And those lines, for me and for many Vault Hunters out there, made us feel like we were going to get this blank slate Vault Hunter, create our own Vault Hunter. Because in Borderlands 3, we have 4 again, and that is not a lot. That is not the expectation that was set by pre-sequel. And I know pre-sequel is kind of like the black sheep of the Borderlands series. Gameplay-wise, I didn't think it was great. But lore-wise, story implication, writing, what we learned about all the characters, character development, it was really fucking good. It was really good in that sense. If you're a Borderlands fan, you have to play pre-sequel specifically to get that story plot points. I would have made the game grindier. I would have dialed back legendary rates and kept them closer to what we saw in Borderlands 2. I definitely would have had a weekly, daily, monthly cadence where you log in, you see your friends, you meet up on Sanctuary, and there would be bounties. There's a bounty board there already, but the way that it's used isn't exactly great. But you would log in, you would see, oh, these bosses are dropping this today, or these are our hunts today. This is the metagame today. This is what we should do. Because one of the things that Borderlands 3 lacks, especially it did at launch, was something connecting all the players. It's such a wide game. Everybody's out doing a thing. But I think having common goals where you can log in, see people doing a thing, and they're like, oh, they're going for this today because that's the daily. I think things like dailies and weeklies are really good for a social game, and I feel like Borderlands lacks it. That's what I would have liked to have seen from like a daily cadence, like going in, doing your chores, getting your guns, and going back to Sanctuary and seeing what everybody else has. I'm certain a lot of Borderlands purists are going to disagree vehemently with the things I want to see, which is a more connected Borderlands experience, a less of a single player Borderlands experience, and that's fine. Borderlands purists, I respect your opinion. I wholeheartedly disagree with it. I think what we got with Borderlands 3 was a very pure Borderlands 2-like experience. But I think when you're making a numbered sequel and you're really trying to propel an IP into the next generation of gaming, you can't lean so heavily into what you've done. To me, Gearbox took a risk with Borderlands. They made a genre-bending looter-shooter over-the-top game because they took a risk. And it seems like their willingness to take risks has really faded over the years. Because Borderlands 3 to me was safe. Borderlands 3 to me was not a risk. As a Borderlands fan, I like the risk that they took with Borderlands. I'm not afraid for them to take another risk. I'm afraid for them to take no risks. I'm afraid for them to get stagnant in the formula. It needs to change. It needs to evolve. It needs to be better. I'm certain we're going to get a 4th iteration of Borderlands, and I really hope that the social systems and the grindiness of it has a lot more meaning to it than simply going out and finding oranges. There needs to be more to it. Gearbox, I love you guys. I think you have some incredibly talented developers and artists. Use them, and I look forward to see what you guys have for me. Borderlands 3, I'm going to continue to play every DLC. I enjoy the DLCs. I play it once, I put it down. I want Borderlands to be that thing that I play every day with chat, with my friends, to try to better my character, to try to better my loadout. And I hope you can deliver.